Today you join me down at Willow Park Fishery. It's a 10-acre lake, jam-packed, full of carp, and hopefully we're going to be in for a little bit of winter action. I arrived yesterday around 11-12 o'clock, flicked out the rods, and so far I've been lucky enough to catch 2 fish. No monsters, but hopefully as the session progresses we're going to be able to catch a few a little bit bigger. I'm fishing all 3 rods out on zigs at the moment. As speaking to the bailiffs yesterday, a few fish have been coming out on zigs and I'd be stupid to start fishing on the bottom, so that's what I'm going to start my session with, and hopefully it won't be too long until we catch one of those Willow Park bangers. Before turning up, I had a quick look on social media to see where the fish were coming out of, what sort of areas of the lake the fish were holding up in. I did find a few different areas, but when I arrived, I went into the tackle shop, spoke to a few of the lads in there, and they were really helpful. They told me pegs 4, 5, them sort of pegs, they'd been doing a few bites, but the main area to target was pegs 8, 9 and 10, and when I arrived, these pegs were available, so I decided to jump into 9 as I felt like this was going to be the best area and give me the best chance of catching a few fish. I think it's really important when you take information from social media and the bailiffs, don't take it as gospel, still have a look around the lake, because one day all the fish might be held up down one end of the lake and that's where all the bites might be coming from. But you might take a walk around to the other end of the lake, find a group of fish. So yes, take that information, but don't take it as gospel. The time's just gone 1:30, and yeah, over the next couple of hours I'm certainly feeling a lot more confident than I was this morning. There's a couple of different reasons why. The first reason is the sun's been out now and that water is a lot warmer than it was this morning. And the second reason is when I actually arrived yesterday, the guy who was fishing on the lake, he'd caught a fish around 2 o'clock in the afternoon the previous day. So when I set up yesterday, I made sure to get the rods out as quick as possible, and come around 2, half 2, I was also able to get a bite, and I just feel like that could be a potential bite time. So I've got all 3 rods out there now. They're still all out on zigs, but I'm going to sit on my hands now and just sort of see the next couple of hours out. If I don't catch anything over the next couple of hours, I'm going to start thinking about doing a few changes. Now, I've played around with different depths of zigs, different colours, and I think the next option would be to fish on the deck. So that's what I'm going to do if I don't catch anything, but I am confident that these zigs are going to be able to do the do. So I'm just going to talk about the zig setup that I'm using and the few little tweaks that I do to this method to make sure that my hook bait is standing out and as attractive as possible to the carp. So all I've got here is 12-pound zig flow line. This is attached to a size 6 floater claw hook. Sometimes I'll use a smaller hook or a bigger hook. On this session I'm using quite a large hook, and the reason for that is it's a barbless reel down here, and when that hook goes in I want to make sure that the hook is staying firm in the fish's mouth. And on there I've got a zig screw, and on this zig in particular I've got a yellow one. Now you can change around with the colours, and I really like to do this especially when zig fishing, changing the colour of foam or pop-up and the zig screw. I just feel like playing around with colours you'll be able to find a particular colour that's working perfect on the day. On this rig I'm using quite a large bit of rig foam, and there's a couple of different reasons for that. The first reason is I'm using quite a large hook, but having a nice chunky bit of foam, it's going to make sure it's popped up and presented perfect. Also on this rig you'll notice that I've attached quite a few maggots on the top, and again that's just adding extra weight onto the zig, so having a chunky piece of foam is really important to make sure it's popped up. Now one other thing that I do to my zigs to give them a little bit more smell and a little bit more attraction is I'll use a bit of plume juice, just put that on the hook bait every time I'm casting out, and just by adding that it just makes that hook bait stand out a little bit more. It's all about making sure that your hook bait is attractive as possible, so when them carp aren't really doing anything and they're not looking for a feed, if they see something nice, high, visual, smelling attractive and there's maybe a few maggots on top, I can guarantee you a carp will want to take that in first time of asking. Now when you're adding worms and maggots on top of zigs, it's really important to think that a zig is actually just a pop-up, and before you cast it out, just check it in the margin. Yes, it's probably going to be popped up, but make sure that it's buoyant enough so when you cast out it's going to be held up there, it's not going to be sinking down to the bottom, as that's the last thing you want to be doing when you're casting out. When it comes to picking hook bait and colour choice on zigs, there's a few different combinations, but I try and keep it simple. And if I'm fishing somewhere where the water clarity is quite clear, I'll choose a dark hook bait, and this is because it's going to silhouette against the surface. If I'm fishing a venue where the water is slightly darker in colour, I'll use a high vis, high attract hook bait, something like a bit of yellow foam or citrus pop-up. Here at Willow Park, to be honest, the lake's quite shallow, average depths, 4 to 6 feet in depth, so you don't really have that much room to play around with zig depth. When I started this session, I cast out 4 to 3 foot zigs, and the reason for this is a few fish have been coming out on this depth, and I felt like if there was any fish lower in the water, they'd spot that zig mid-water, and if there was any fish cruising above it, it wouldn't take long for one of them to dip down and pick up a hook bait. I've persevered with the zigs today, and yeah, nothing's happened on them. So it's about 4 o'clock now, we're just starting to lose the light. And what I'm doing now is I'm just having a little lead around with a leading rod to find a spot where I'm going to put a couple of rods out on the deck tonight. Now I found a spot out there, to be honest, in front of the swim, it's quite shallow, there's a lot of gravel, but I found one area in particular where it just feels a little bit deeper, a little bit softer, like there's silt or clay there. And yeah, I feel like that's going to be the perfect area to put my rods out there tonight. I'm going to put 2 rods, as mentioned, on the deck, but with the 3rd rod, I am going to keep it out on a zig because the few fish that have been coming out of the lake have been on zigs. So that's going to be the tactic tonight. Anyway, I'll get this one clipped up, get a few spots out, and we'll see what the night brings. So the area that I picked when I was leading up, it's quite a soft area. It feels like silt, maybe a little bit of clay, and it's definitely presentable. To be honest, 95% of the lake is nice and clear. There's plenty of gravel out there, but I just felt like fishing somewhere where there was a little bit of silt. It could be something a little bit different. It would hold natural food, and the carp that I have been seeing showing have been in this area, and I felt like that was going to be the obvious feature to fish too. When I started introducing bait down here on this session, I was a little bit cautious on how much bait I was going to be putting in. Once you put it in, you can't take it back out, and I felt like if I overdone it, I could kill the swim completely. It was a little bit hard as well because there's only one other guy fishing the lake, and he's fishing zigs. He hasn't put any bait out, so I'm not sure if the fish are going to be up for a feed or not. So when I started introducing the bait, I put around 8 to 10 dot spots out on the spot and putting it nice and tight. I felt like if there was any fish in the area, it was enough to get the heads down, nick a bite, and once I caught one, I'd be able to top up the spot accordingly. And there we have it. There's our morning prize. It was a quiet night. Just before dark, I actually lost a fish on the middle rod, but it made me confident that putting the rods on the deck was a good move. Yeah, just on first light, we've been able to catch this one. Quite a long common, but there's plenty of scaly mirrors in here, so hopefully at some point today, we'll be able to get one of them in the bottom of the landing net. When I caught that fish on first light, when I was reeling in the fish, I did actually see a couple of fish just show just behind the spot, and just after putting it back, I did see a few more shows in the general area. So the fish were clearly barefoot, up for a feed. I didn't catch anything, but I was patient. I sat on my hands because, like I said, the last thing I wanted to do was go crashing a load of leads and spods on top of feeding fish. I held back for around 3 to 4 hours. Once the shows had sort of subsided and the action had died down, that's when I decided to top up, because I felt like the chance of getting a bite had passed away, and I felt like it was a nice time just to top up the spot ready for the rest of the day. I've fished Willow Park a few times in the past, and every time I've came down here, to be fair, it's not a particularly hard venue. You can find the fish fairly easy. The last time I was down here, I was catching on zigs, catching on the bottom, and to be fair, you can just play around with tactics down Willow Park. It's not too tactic specific, so if you're someone who likes to play around, Willow Park is certainly a venue I'd fish. I've just reeled in the 2 rods from the baited spot, and what I'm going to do now is just make sure that I've got fresh rigs on there, fresh hook baits, get them back out there, and a few dot spots just to top up the area. Now, I did land one this morning, and unfortunately I lost one yesterday evening just after getting the rods out onto the deck. But both of them bites came to hook baits topped with maggots. Now, I had one hook bait out there topped with maggots. The other hook bait, on the other hand, didn't have any natural bait or maggots on top. So when I'm redoing the rods now, I'm going to make sure to put some maggots on both hook baits, as you never know, that could be the difference on why the other rod didn't get a bite. With the 3rd rod, I'm going to keep it out there with a zig, just because a few fish have been coming out on zigs, and although I have caught on the bottom, you never know, and with the conditions that we've got, I can just imagine the carp swimming around, not on the bottom, all parts of the day. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll get these out, freshen up the spot. It won't be too long, hopefully, until we get another one. Now, the bait mix that I've been using down here at Willow Park, it's kind of revolved around using natural bait, and there's a few other ingredients added into the mix just to add that extra pulling power. So the first ingredient that I've added into the mix is hemp. Now to be honest, I don't make a spod mix without adding hemp. It's a particle that catches carp all across the country and it's great for keeping the fish in the area and grubbing about. The next ingredient into the mix was maggots. Now maggots are a great bait at any time of the year, especially in the colder months, and I just felt adding red maggots into the mix would add that little bit of colour, a little bit of movement and give me a hook bait option if I wanted to add a few maggots on top of the pop-ups or rafters. I then added casters into the mix. Now the reason I used casters as well as maggots was I feel like casters are a bait that's been sort of forgotten about. A lot of people these days use either maggots or worms. Casters, it's sort of a forgotten bit and I felt like it would just add that little bit different of an element into the mix. The third and final natural bait that I added into the mix was worms. Now I chopped these up and the reason for that was I was getting more for my money. Instead of putting out whole worms, there was a lot more smaller food items that would keep the fish grubbing about, but also with them being chopped up, it was going to be constantly pumping out natural attraction into the water, helping draw them carp into the area. Once I'd added all the natural ingredients into the mix, I then added some Scopex squid flake. Now the reason why I used the flake on this session and not the whole boilies, as I felt like adding the flake, it would settle nicely on top of the spot that I picked out there, which was silt with a little bit of clay. I just felt like it was going to be a nice carpet and it would keep the fish grubbing around along with the hemp. The final ingredient into the mix was simply just a tin of sweet corn. Now I didn't go crazy with the sweet corn, just a small tin, and the reason for that was A, it would give me a hook bait option. I could fish either a wafter top with corn, possibly double sweet corn, but the other reason for that was it's quite a dark mix without the sweet corn and I just felt adding that fleck of colour could attract the carp if they're swimming around the area. So that's the mix that I've been using down here at Willow Park. Like I said, it's quite a grubbing around mix, it's full of naturals and I feel like it's a perfect mix for this time of year. Even at this time of year when it's still quite cold, the temperatures are slowly starting to creep up, but then water temperatures are quite low, I still like to introduce a bit of bait. Now the reason for this is the type of venues where I fish, there's a lot of carp and I feel like whether it's summer or winter, if I introduce a little bit of bait, I'm going to get a reaction from the fish. Down here at Willow Park, we've got around 350 to 400 carp. The lake is only 10 acres in size, it's quite shallow, so I feel like when them rods are out there, I'm not going to be too far away from the carp. So I feel like adding that bait, if there's any fish in the area, it's going to get them grubbing around and picking up them hook baits. For this fishery in focus, we're currently down here at Willow Park Fishery. Now the fishery itself is located just outside of Aldershot and there's 3 lakes on the complex. We're currently fishing on the large lake, so I'm going to run through the stock, the average size of fish and some of the hot spots around the lake. So the first thing that you'll notice when arriving at the fishery and driving through the gate, you've got an on-site tackle shop. Go in there, speak to the bailiffs, figure out where the fish have been coming out from. You've also got a cafe, on-site toilet and an area to dip your landing nets and mats. The big lake, which is the lake we're currently fishing, is a 10-acre lake with a stock of around 350 to 400 carp, and Willow Park is known for having some beautiful scaly mirrors. In here you've got quite a few known fish, there's quite a few commons around 26 to 28 pounds, but the main carp that's still the show are a couple of fully scaled known as the Princess and the Duchess, which go over the 30-pound barrier. Dotted around the lake, there's several maps showing you from each swim where your boundaries are, so there's going to be no confusion when you're setting up and finding a spot. You're not going to be fishing out of your swim into someone else's water, and I think that's really important and something that's quite comforting knowing in the back of your mind when you find a spot, especially down here at busy day ticket waters, that you're not going to be wiping out other people because you're going to be within your boundary. What I'm going to do now is I've got a map of Willow Park Fishery, the big lake, on my phone, and what I'm going to do is give you a virtual guided tour around the lake and talk through some of the hot swims and favoured areas on the lake. Starting off in peg 5, this peg commands a lot of water and you can get out into the central bowl of the lake. From the swim, your maximum range is 18 raps, which is also 72 yards, and that's plenty enough distance to get out there if the fish are holding up in the middle. Like I said, you get plenty of water in the swim, so it's worth having a lead about in close and out long and finding the perfect spot for your session. Moving around the lake into pegs 8 to 10, again this area of the lake commands the central zone of the lake. You're limited to 20 wraps, which again is more than enough to get out there, but the important thing to consider when you're fishing these pegs is that you've got the deepest part of the lake just in front of you of depths of around 8 to 10 feet. As you move further out into the lake, the water gets shallower and there's a nice plateau out in the middle where the fish certainly get up there when the sun's out or the weather's warm. If you carry on moving around the lake, you then find peg 11. Now peg 11 is tucked away in its own little bay, it's nice and secluded, and if you're into close quarters fishing, this is definitely an area that I would consider. You've got plenty of snags, plenty of areas where the carp are going to push away. If the main body of the lake is quite pressured, the carp are going to move in there for safety, and yet it can be a great area, especially in the summer months. Next up, peg 14 and 15, in between these two swims you've actually got a large overhanging willow tree in the margin, and this can be a great area to fish as there's a nice comfortable depth where the carp are going to creep up that margin under the tree and feel safe. Moving round onto the road bank, pegs 21 to 24, these pegs again give you great access out into the middle, but if you're coming down here with a few mates, these pegs are nice and close together, so if you're wanting to have a bit of a social, this is definitely an area I'd check out. Finally, pegs 25 back round to peg 1 in the car park. This end of the lake is fairly shallow, and indeed the shallowest part of the lake. This water is going to warm up the quickest. I'd check up there in the summer months, but don't rule it out there in the winter as carp can be found in mad locations in the colder months, so definitely don't rule that out. Down here at Willow Park, the majority of the swims allow you to see a great expanse of the water, so if you arrive and you don't know where to set up, just plot up in a swim. You're going to be able to see if any fish show around the lake and act accordingly on where them fish are holding up. It's a 2-rod limit down here at Willow Park. However, if the lake is fairly quiet, like it has been on this session, go into the tackle shop, speak to the bailiffs, as if it's quiet they'll allow you to use an extra 3rd rod. One final thing to mention is that the bailiffs down here at Willow Park Fishery, they're constantly walking around making sure that the fishery is clean, and the pegs have been designed for anglers. They're nice and big, allowing you to have a nice comfortable session down here at Willow Park and enjoy your fishing. Well, we're starting to lose the light rapidly, and what I'm going to do for the final night is I'm going to fish all 3 rods on this spot, nice and tight over a little bed of bait, as yesterday evening and this morning the fish clearly reacted to the bait going in there, and I just feel confident fishing out on the spot it's going to be able to produce a few more fish. So I'll quickly get this rod clipped up out on the spot, and hopefully at some point tonight we'll be able to catch one. Willow Park is only a small lake, it's 10 acres in size, it's quite shallow. There are areas where it goes a little bit deeper, and I think the main thing about this lake is just stay active, keep playing around with tactics. One day the fish might be on the feed and you'll be catching over bait, the next the sun might come out, you'll be catching on zigs. Just when you come down here, have an open mind, play around with tactics and figure out what's working best on the day. Well, it's about 9 o'clock in the evening. I've just finished eating and we're just sat up there, and yet the left-hander is just let out a few bleeps and we're into a fish. Hopefully it's a fully skilled carp, but if it isn't, hopefully if we get it in the net, I really don't care. Because yeah, we've had to work hard with this bite today, chopping and changing tactics, but I feel like getting 3 rods nice and tight on the bait was definitely the right move, and hopefully this isn't going to be the final one of the night. It's another comment. Ideally I was hoping it was going to be one of the scaly mirrors Willow Park's famous for, but nevertheless it's a fish, and that fish is in the bottom of the landing net. There's the result of that hard fighting fish. A long lane common, no monster, it isn't the fully skilled that I was dreaming of, but I really don't care. It's another fish in pretty hard conditions, and yeah, I'm just absolutely buzzing. It definitely paid off making sure that I put all 3 rods out on the spot, as you never know, that rod could have been the rod that was out there on the zig, but changing it onto the bottom has certainly paid off. As soon as I got the fish into the net, I was quick to get the rod back out on the spot, as you never know, there might be a few more fish feeding out there. I haven't topped up with any bait because the last thing I want to do is go firing a load of spods on top of feeding fish in quite shallow water. Hopefully just flicking that small lead onto the spot, it hasn't disturbed the fish too much and we might be able to get another one. But if not, this is the perfect way to start the night.
You're in, mate.
That's a bite. Well, literally, that rod that I've just chucked out there is just ripped off, and it definitely seems it paid off not topping up, just getting the rig back out there nice and quick. And yeah, that absolutely screamed off. What a mad 20 minutes that was. Literally, as that small common was just putting back, the left-hander, which I've just re-chucked onto the spot, ripped off again, and we're able to catch this one. 4 ounces, under 20 pounds, not that the weight relevant, but yeah, it looks like moving all 3 rods onto the spot is definitely worked. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to re-chuck the rod back out on the spot. I'm not going to top up just yet, I'm going to give it around an hour or so, and then I'm going to put a few dot spods onto the area as it's clear that the fish are up for a feed. And yeah, although that it isn't one of the fully scaled that I was hoping for, it's just good to get a bend in the rod. When you're playing fish down here at Willow Park, there's a couple of different things to take into consideration. The first thing is, it's a barbless hook rule, so you've got the risk of suffering hook pulls when playing fish. Now, it's quite shallow water, they're going to be fighting hard, they're going to be kiting left and right, so don't rush, take it steady, and it will make sure that you land more fish in the bottom of the landing net. And there she is. Eventually we were able to catch the mirror that we were after. It wasn't the fully scaled that we were hoping for, but I'm glad to say just down in the net we had a double take early part of this morning and I've got the fully in the net. It was quite a productive night. I also lost one and had a small common around 2 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, moving 3 rods on the bait was definitely key in the success to last night. But I'll get this one slipped back and get the beautiful fully out on the mat to show you. I've really enjoyed my time down here at Willow Park Fishery. I've been able to get 10 bites, landing 8 fish. I did lose a couple, but that really hasn't spoilt the session. At the start of the session, I was catching on zigs, but as the conditions changed, I decided to put the rods out on the deck. I went from a good old trusty blowback rig, put them out there, a few dot spods over the top, and it didn't take long for the fish to get their heads down and have a little bit of a feed. To be honest, I was catching mainly commons, but on the final morning, I was able to get through to the mirrors. One was quite dark, quite unique, and the other one was a scaly banger and the fish that I was dreaming of catching on this session. And there she is, the fully scaled that I've been dreaming of and what Willow Park is famous for. It's been a productive couple of days down here and it just shows chopping and changing tactics, the results are certainly there to be had. Anyway, I'm going to get this beautiful carp slip back. Like I said, one of the best looking carp that I've ever caught, but hopefully you've learned a thing or two about Willow Park. You guys can come down here and catch carp just like this one here.